Hey guys, welcome. It's Billy from DCC here, and we're just going to continue on with our Tuesday night Bible study through the Gospel of Matthew. It just was going to be kind of a shorter night tonight anyway, and during this summer with some events and camps and things going on, there's going to be quite a few times where we're not able to meet live, and so we'll be dropping videos like this throughout the summer. So just want to kind of get into that kind of possibility for us. If you've been following along with us as we go through the Gospel of Matthew, you'll have seen some really cool things so far. We've been walking through Matthew for more than 40 hours so far, and we've gotten to chapter 8, which puts us, if you're familiar with how Matthew's broken down, we kind of see Matthew broken down into 5 sections with 5 big speeches, sermons, discourses by Jesus. And it's been really cool to see that so far. And we've already been through the whole first one of those, typically called the Sermon on the Mountain, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. But now we're kind of walking into another narrative section in Matthew. And last week we opened it up, and chapters 8 and 9 go together really well. We see in chapter 8 it hits off first with 3 healings in a row, and if you look at them, it doesn't feel like they're overly connected until you look just a little bit closer. The fact that Jesus heals a leper, he heals a Roman centurion's servant, and then he heals Peter's mother-in-law. A lot of commentators have pointed out that this kind of lumping together makes it feel like what Matthew's trying to convey through these stories put together is that Jesus was showing a special affinity and a special desire to heal and help those who are socially outcast, like Roman soldiers, like lepers, like women who were, even if they weren't considered outcasts in first century world, they were often considered second class citizens, and Jesus doesn't see things that way at all. Well, we wrapped up those first 17 verses or so in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 8, last time. And I decided just to do a video with this one um, uh, because it's kind of a shorter text. It wasn't going to fill the whole hour, and I've got some things I wanted to do with my family tonight. So I wanted to just kind of go through these 5 verses together, look at them, and we get introduced to a couple of things here that I think will be good, and we'll kind of mention briefly today, but recognize that once it comes up in bigger ways later in Matthew, we'll hit them a little bit harder then. So let's just read this little section, this little text. So there was 3 healings, right? And then we have this kind of 2 different discipleship teachings towards 2 different people. And then next week we'll begin going into 3 more miracles, not all healings, unless you consider the calming of the storm a healing of nature, but that's something we'll talk about next week. But here, let's just focus on what's going on here. Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. It says this: Now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go to the other side. And a scribe came up to him and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, and but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Okay, so just picture the way Matthew's kind of structured his narrative so far as Jesus came down off the mountain. Great crowds were following him. As they're following him and they're making their way back to Capernaum, here comes a leper, and he wants to be healed, and Jesus touches him and heals him. Here comes this centurion coming and recognizing that Jesus has so much authority over the physical realm and over physical illnesses that he doesn't even need to be in place to in the place to heal his servant. And then he comes into Peter's house and heals Peter's mother-in-law. here. And so these great crowds are beginning to follow Jesus, but now Jesus sees this crowd and he's like, I need to step away for a minute. I need to move away for a hot minute. And this crowd comes around him, and so he gives orders to go over to the other side. Who exactly he gives orders to, we're not 100% sure here, but especially with next story, we might get the picture that it was with the 12. The 12. So they give orders to go to the other side of the lake, and a scribe comes up to him. You can almost hear this happening. Here Jesus is with his tight-knit inner circle, if you want to say, with the 12, maybe a few more. And he says, it's time to go, move on to this next space. And a scribe came up and said, Teacher, I'll go with you wherever you go. There's a level of frenzied excitement here that we start to get here. Now, this should surprise us a little bit. If we're reading carefully through Matthew, it should surprise us to see a scribe wanting to follow Jesus. Because so far, scribes have only been mentioned negatively, especially in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where we heard lots of criticism of the scribes and the Pharisees, often calling them hypocrites and kind of negating some of their teaching and practice in the first century world. And so it should be a little bit of a surprise to see this scribe coming up to him. Now, what exactly is wrong here? It's one of those things where I don't actually see anything wrong necessarily with the scribe wanting to follow Jesus. I don't see any negativity here, but Jesus sees something that I can't see. Jesus sees something that this scribe, this teacher of the law himself can't see. And it's the fact that he's a little overeager and hasn't considered the cost of following him, right? Because Jesus points out to him, hey, you might want to follow me, but guess what? It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be a pleasant journey. It's not going to be a pleasant ride. What does Jesus say? He says, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Following me might sound exciting in the moment, but you have to recognize, you have to realize, you have to know that this is going to be, this is not going to be a fun journey. In fact, it's going to be a little more austere than foxes and birds living out in the wild. The Son of Man is nowhere to lay his head. In fact, in the very next story, we're going to find Jesus having to find a place to take a nap on a boat in the middle of a storm. That's when he says the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. That's a pretty clear indication right immediately following this story. And so I think what's going on here is Jesus is getting this man to consider, to as he'll do in another space, to count the cost of following Jesus. Are you willing to give up, having a place to lay and your head and have a home? Are you willing to get on the road and suffer what's going to be suffered by the disciples? Another really interesting thing here is, and you may not recognize this right up front, but if you've been following along with us as we studied through Matthew, you'll note that we run into a brand new phrase and brand new title for Jesus here, the Son of Man. In Matthew, this is the first time that we actually run into this title for Jesus. Now, when we hear this title, we might go, oh, well, this must be a title that emphasizes the humanity of Jesus. But actually, if this is kind of a debated topic, and if you go read multiple commentators, you're going to find multiple different ways of looking at the Son of Man. I got down a rabbit hole looking at some of that today. But many people will find a connection back in Daniel chapter 7. Actually, let me see if I can pull that up for you guys right now. Daniel chapter 7. It's a really interesting prophetic passage in Daniel chapter 7. Right down here in verse 13 and 14, there's this prophetic vision in Daniel of the Ancient of Days, a picture, a depiction of Yahweh giving the kingdom, giving all authority over heaven, the heavens and the earth to, well, let's see what it says. I saw in night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. That's the guy. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. And so there's this picture of the Son of Man coming with the clouds, which, by the way, we might note some things in a few other passages coming later in Matthew, because we often will view the coming with the clouds as the second coming, but when we read it alongside Daniel, we might come to a different conclusion, but that's not what we're going to focus on today. There came one like a son of man. And so if we connect this idea, this picture of Jesus, this title for Jesus, this phrase for Jesus that we run into here in Matthew 8, verse 20, for the very first time in the Gospel of Matthew, then we're not really going to be focusing on his humanity, but we're actually going to be focusing on his exaltation and his pre-existence, the one who was in the very throne room of heaven and is ultimately given eternal authority over the seen and unseen realm. And so it's just kind of a really interesting thing. We're going to note this again as we come to it later in Matthew, but I just wanted to just take a quick moment and point out that this title, the Son of Man, has something going on here. So we've got this scribe comes, I'll follow you wherever you go. Jesus says, well, I don't have any place to chill. Yeah, I don't have a place that's of comfort. If you follow me, it's not going to be a journey of comfort. So just know that up front. And what I really love about this is there's no, look, I mean, I'm right here, we're right here together. There's nothing in between, right? We don't know how he responded. We don't know if this scribe said, all right, I'm in still, and jumped in the boat. We don't know if he walked away sad because he was a guy who liked a nice, soft feather bed. We don't really know what happens between these two. It's just left hanging there. And we do run into his own disciples asking later on about all the things that they've given up and what will be afforded to them. But we get this picture that it's not going to be an easy journey, and Jesus isn't trying to trick people into coming along. He's calling them to walk into this discipleship, walk into this following of Jesus with their eyes open to the cost of what it's going to take to follow him. And so Jesus said to him, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man, me, Messiah, Jesus, has nowhere to lay his head. Verse 21. But another of the disciples, now that's interesting. We call him another of the disciples. So at least at some level, that scribe is following Jesus, right? He is a disciple at some level. And we're going to see that over and over again throughout the Gospels. Oh, something I forgot to mention. Did you notice what this scribe called Jesus? Called him teacher. Now, every other time we see Jesus called teacher in the Gospel of Matthew is moving forward, what we're going to see are people who do not fully believe in him. They come to him and they're using this kind of respectful title, your guy who's teaching, but I'm not really fully believing that in who you are as being revealed through what you're doing and what you're saying. And so to call him teacher is accurate, yes, but not adequate. It's not complete. It doesn't fully reflect who Jesus is. He's more than a teacher. He's more than what they would assume him to be. But anyways, so the other, and the scribe, according to verse 21, when it says another of the disciples, the scribe is a disciple of Jesus. He's begun to follow him at some level. Again, we don't know if Jesus' statement here scared him off or welcomed him in, but we do know that Jesus was inviting him to follow him with his eyes wide open as to what it was going to cost. So another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Now, there's a couple different ways to think about this passage, right? Some commentators, let me fast forward. Actually, most commentators don't think what he's saying is, "Hey, Jesus, my dad just died. I can't quite come today, but I'll be there tomorrow." Most commentators think one of two things is going on: is that his dad is older, later in life, and will maybe die soon, and he wants to stick around and be there with his family, and then go through the whole months of mourning and grieving period, and then come follow Jesus. Another thought here is just that his dad's not even necessarily near the end of his life, but he's just like, when my family situation straightens out, then and only then will I be ready to come and follow you, Jesus. It's one of those kind of really just strange things, and we're not 100% sure exactly what is going on here. But at the very least, what we can say is this man wishes to postpone his discipleship until after something else. He's making it very, very clear that there are priorities that come before his discipleship, his following of Jesus. And I think that's going to be kind of the key here. While we have the first guy being a little bit over eager, right? He hadn't considered the cost. This other disciple is under eager. He wants to wait till his family situation is just right for him to be able to come. And so, I mean, Jesus, if you're going to follow him, Jesus doesn't want any excuses. Even the affairs of life and family, he says, you really need to make sure that I'm number one. He's going to teach later on, even in starker terms, that if you don't hate your family, you can't be my disciple. Now, of course, he's not calling you to hate anyone. What he's actually doing is he's setting up this nice, beautiful, rhetorical statement for you to put the love you have for Christ next to the love you have for your family. And the love for Christ is going to be so much superior that what you have for your family could be taken as hate based on that. But Jesus doesn't have any, he says, let the dead bury their dead. And what exactly he means by that, whether he's kind of going metaphorically, let the spiritually dead worry about the affairs of this life, or maybe he's even using some sarcasm here to talk about the physically dead. Jesus is just very, very clearly encouraging some of the same things he encouraged just recently over in the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks a little bit about not being concerned about the worries of this life, but allowing them to worry about themselves. Don't be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Jesus says, if you really want to follow me, if you really want to be my disciple, then just follow me. Let the rest of it work itself out. Just make following me the number one thing you do. And so I think that's where we're at. Now, some commentators have wondered how this fits into what follows. Because what follows is Jesus calms the storm in the boat. It's going to be a really fun story. I'll just scroll through it with you. And then he comes in and he heals two different men with demons over here in the Gerasenes. And you go, well, what is this story? Because Matthew seems to be lumping some things together categorically. What does this story have to do with those next two? Well, catch how he answers this first scribe who says, I'll follow you wherever you go. Jesus says, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Well, we see that come and be a big deal right here. Look, he doesn't have a place to lay his head. Yeah, he's right here taking a nap in the boat. He doesn't have a place to lay his head. He's got to take a nap in the middle of a storm. And not only that, but then he says, "Let the dead bury their own dead." Sorry, I scrolled up too far. Let the dead bury their own dead. Well, then he's going to run into these Gerasene demoniacs. But guess what? This is really interesting. They were living, they were coming out of the tombs. Perhaps that's where they lived. They were so outcast from society that they lived in the tombs. They were living among the dead, and so it actually kind of flows all together. There's some nice connecting material. But next time we get together, hopefully we'll do this live next week. Next time we get together, we'll take a little bit closer look at these next few verses, these next few stories. Jesus calming a storm, Jesus healing these two demon-possessed people, and we might even get into chapter 9. But for now, thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining, and we'll be back next time. God bless.